Thanks everyone. My presentation today is entitled Standards for BIM. My name is Pat Carolan. I'm a Senior Scientific Officer with NSAI. I just started with NSAI last year, and prior to that I was a structural engineer for local authority delivering social housing schemes. So moving on, what we'll cover today is a brief introduction to the NSAI, an introduction to standards. We'll touch on where standards come from, and then we'll finally hit on standards that are related to the BIM industry. Firstly, about NSAI. NSAI is Ireland's national standards body and was established under the NSAI Act of 1996. Under the Act, we have a number of functions which are shared between our four main divisions. The first is standards, where NSAI's team works with relevant parties at national or international level to create, develop and publish globally recognised standards. The second is certification, where a standard already exists. NSAI works with organisations to help them apply it. The third is legal metrology, which protects both Irish industry and consumers by inspecting and certifying measuring instruments used in trade to ensure that they are accurate. And the fourth and final is the National Metrology Laboratory, which is responsible for establishing and maintaining accurate, reliable and traceable measurement standards for physical quantities. So NSAI's role is to connect and facilitate stakeholders with an interest in standardisation. We act as a bridge between industry, academia, government and citizens in the development of new standards, be they national, European or international standards. Later in the presentation I will touch upon the international organisations we are a member of, which are relative to the BIM industry. But first, a brief introduction to standards themselves. So what is a standard? A standard is a document which is voluntary in application. It's established by all interested parties. It reflects consensus, approved by a recognised body. It's meant for common and repeated use and can be used for guidance to support market operators. Types of standards. Broadly speaking, there are four distinct types of standards. Most standards could fall into one of these four types. First up is product standards. These are agreements relating to characteristics of products. Service standards, which provide guidance for both the service provider and the user of the service. We have process standards, which give guidance on conditions and requirements which apply to the production, storage, packaging or testing of products. And finally, we have management standards, which help organisations to manage their activities. Management standards are usually the most widely known standards, as they are horizontal in application and are not confined to one area or sector. So why do we have standards? Well, standards can be used to support compliance with legal obligations, to help to define and promote state-of-the-art and best practices, to increase the safety of products, processes and services, to protect consumer health, to protect the environment, to promote the interoperability of products and services, and to capture, promote and spread new technologies and knowledge. Finally, before I begin to highlight how standards are supporting the BIM industry, a quick word on where standards come from. The truth is they come from lots of different organisations at both international, European and national level. Actually, most Irish standards are not actually homegrown, but have their origins in international committees. European standards come from the following organisations, each of which NSAI is Ireland's national member of. We have CEN-CENELEC, which is the European Committee for Electrotechnical Standardisation, which deals specifically with electrical and electrotechnical standardisation. We have ETSI, the European Telecommunications Standards Institute, which deals specifically with electronic communications, and CEN, the European Committee for Standardisation, which encompasses virtually all other areas such as technical services, energy, healthcare, food, etc. Perhaps this is a good time just to point out that BSI still remain a member of each of these organisations and are under the same obligations as NSAI. At international level, the equivalent organisations are ISO, the International Organisation for Standardisation, the IEC, the International Electrotechnical Commission, and the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union. There are agreements within the World Trade Organization that recognise the work of these organisations as tools to support global trade. Furthermore, there are agreements between European and international standard organisations with regards to how they collaborate. Again, the aim of these agreements is to reduce technical barriers to global trade of goods and services. So briefly, with regards to how we manage the interplay between all of the organisations, I try to summarise in this slide. In NSAI, we have a number of committees made up of technical experts. They are mapped to European and international committees who develop standards in their areas of expertise. We in NSAI then have systems in place to support the flow of information between our national committees and the mirror international committees. Our priority is to engage internationally and to place Irish stakeholders at the centre of international standards development. So a technical committee will be made up of various interested stakeholders, each volunteering their expertise to support standardisation. Example, our BIM committee will consist of BIM experts who will develop BIM-related standards. So a typical committee representation is shown. You have consumer bodies, certification bodies, government departments, enforcement bodies, trade associations, standards users, professional institutions, research organisations, trade unions and educational bodies. A chair is appointed by the committee members, and NSAI will provide a secretariat service to facilitate the process and to support the committee. So NSAI publish or make available essentially all of the documents developed by each of the organisations previously mentioned. As members of CEN, CENELEC and ETSI, we are obliged to adopt every European standard as an Irish standard, I.S.EN, and withdraw any conflicting national standards. A reminder that this obligation also remains with BSI, and the status of British standards has remained the same following Brexit. So just a quick recap on all of that. Standards enable industry to demonstrate compliance with legislative requirements. For example, some of the provisions included in the building regulations. They're an important reference for clients, specifiers, designers and builders, and their use and upkeep help keep pace with technical innovations. So just a quick slide to highlight the standards on their own are voluntary documents and only become mandatory if they are referenced in legislation. They are developed by interested parties through private standard organisation process, fully open and transparent public consultation for each standard. They're based on consensus of all interested parties and are considered for revision at least every 5 years. So, standards for BIM. NSAI TC68 BIM is the National BIM Committee. It currently has 21 members from a range of industry within BIM. It meets a minimum of 4 times annually and has ongoing correspondence regarding CEN ballots. The main scope of the committee is to monitor the work of the CEN TC442 committee by providing national inputs to ballots from CEN TC442, responding to information requests from CEN TC442, and act as an observer member to the ISO technical committee. So CEN TC442, driven by the fast shifts towards digitisation in the construction industry, the EU set up a programme to develop and define standards for BIM across all European countries. The technical committee CEN TC442 is established to take charge of the standardisation work regarding all information in the built environment. The structure of the technical committee of CEN TC442 is as follows. So this slide gives an overview of TC442, which a national committee monitors. There's 10 working groups within this committee, which some of our members sit on. The scope of this committee is to develop a structured set of standards, specifications and reports which specify methodologies to define, describe, exchange, monitor, record and securely handle asset data, semantics and processes with links to geospatial and other external data. It is divided into working groups, each dealing with a particular subject. So the projects working group would be of most interest to us. You have working group 2, which deals with exchange information, working group 3, information delivery specifications, working group 4, support data dictionaries, working group 6, infrastructure, working group 8, competence, and working group 9, digital twins. So these next 2 slides just show an idea of the BIM-related standards that have been published under the technical committee at European level. You'll know some of the 19650 series is in there, 29481, all very popular standards. So NSAI TC68 would have a valuable input into the development of each of these standards through reviewing, commenting and voting at each stage of their progression. A number of our committee members also sit on the SEN working groups and report back to the National Committee on the progress of the relevant standards. So some of the more popular standards and how they fit together are shown on this slide. We have the data dictionary standards, which would be the ISEN ISO 12006 series. 17632 is currently in development. Data templates, elements, products and catalogues, the 23386 series. The level of information need fall under 17412, Part 1 and 2, and Part 3 is currently in development. With data model, schema and format, the 17549, 2 parts currently in development. Documentation, process mapping, 29481, 2 standards published. And then the information management series, which is the 19650 series of standards. And currently there's 2 common data environment standards currently in progress. So the International Standard Series, ISO 19650, deals with organisation and information about construction works, information management, using building information. Parts 1 and 2 were adopted as European standards in 2018, while Parts 3 and 5 were adopted in 2020. Part 4 is due to be published this month. The 19650 series or key BIM standards have been adopted by ISO, SEN and nationally as standards for managing information over the whole life cycle of a built asset using BIM. In 2021, NSAI developed a national annex to Part 2 of that series. This national annex provides guidance on how to implement ISEN ISO 19650 Part 2 within the national context of construction projects. More specifically, it contains the Irish technical parameters and data components used in BIM, such as field identification and information containers. So it targets specific clauses which require additional consideration for effective implementation in the Irish construction market. So briefly going through a couple of the clauses, the annex largely focuses on information container identification and metadata requirement clauses in the underlying standard. So clause 5 deals with information container identification. It recommends field-based unique ID convention, identifying certain fields which may be omitted if not applicable to the associated project. Clause 6 deals with field codification. It gives recommendations on a number of characters to be used for project, sub-project or phase, element or system, spatial zone, level, where it also recommends unique level codes, information type, where once again it recommends unique information type codes, originator, project role, once again, unique project role codes, number. So before I wrap up, I'll take this opportunity to invite you to consider getting involved in standardisation. In the medium to long term, you might consider participating in one of our national BIM committees. NSAI TC68 is the national BIM committee. There's a registration form on the NSAI website for registering your interest in any specific committee. If you don't want to get involved in a technical committee at this stage, I urge you to comment on the draft standards as they appear on your standards, your say. Just to note, the participation in NSAI committees is considered as CPD by a number of professional associations. So thank you all very much.